Diver, explorer, expert in marine biology. Stan Waterman searches the world for adventure.
Sandbank here before we put it over.
With him goes his wife, Suzanne, and their 3 children, Gordy, Susie,
Is it really cold?
and Garb.
Yeah, my mask a little. Yeah.
They share the dangers and difficulties of his world, and they share, too, the rewards.
Ready?
There is a strange and beautiful world below the surface. I want them to see it, to understand it, and apply what they've seen to the world around them.
For the Waterman family, a trip to French Polynesia, sponsored by the National Geographic Society, provides a chance to relive the most exciting year of their lives.
It meant taking the children out of school in Princeton, but I felt that what they would learn here would be more than worth the interruption.
At Point Venus, Stan Waterman begins their informal education. On April 13th, 1769, Captain James Cook first dropped anchor in neighboring Matavai Bay. Cook returned to England with tales of noble savages in a tropic paradise. Later, a serene and independent people were invaded by outsiders who brought firearms to the islands and disease, and what is to some the most destructive of all gifts, progress. A modern fable holds that civilization spoils all it touches. But tropic heat, mosquitoes, and intestinal parasites tend to take the edge off idols. Refrigeration and outboard motors enhance Tahiti, not hide it. The streets of Papeete reveal a Parisian influence. The people themselves reflect racial strains attracted by the city's position on world trade routes. Their way of life remains their own, and they seem unconcerned that modern conveniences have made it easier. To Mrs. Waterman and Susie, Papeete offers everything they will need for the family's adventure.
Honey, I'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay, I'm going down.
Chinese merchants form the backbone of the island's economic life, as they do in much of the Pacific. Industrious and skillful, they add their talents to the potpourri of Papeete. The Tahitians themselves practice few crafts, those that were necessary in a simpler age. The designs mimic nature in styles that today influence modern art. Introduced by missionaries, cotton took the place of tapa cloth made from bark. The cloth, called pareu, they use for everything from skirts to curtains. The pinpoints of Polynesia are scattered over 15 million square miles of the Pacific Ocean. Many are random leftovers of volcanic convulsions. The Society Islands form one of the loveliest and most luxurious groups, violent in origin and gentle in aspect. From Papeete, the territory's capital, the copra boat takes the family as far as Raiatea. Once, these outer islands could be reached only by outrigger canoe, a frail lifeline. Even today, seasonal storms can cut them off completely. Unloading proceeds rapidly, for the ship has other ports of call. The final leg of their journey will be short, but for the Watermans, it won't be measured in miles. Their launch will take them to another world, the distant speck of land they call Aje's Island. Behind them lies a life they were born to. Ahead waits another, older but unknown. Few strangers call it Aje's Island, and the experience promises to be as rare for the island children as for the Waterman children. Stan knows these waters, has photographed the life that fills them, and has made fast friends with Aje, owner of the island. Aje runs the affairs of the community, assuming responsibility for its vigor and well-being.
Seeing Aje's face again filled me with a sense of rediscovery, a sense of life as it was and may never be again, and a sense of delight that I could now share all this with my children.
The Watermans awake to the first day of their living school.
Okay, Gar. Time to get up. Gordo, come on. Are you awake? Come on. Hustle.
From nearby Tahaa Island come Aje's relatives to join in a community roundup. Primitive cultures sustained by water often develop similar methods for fishing. On the banks of Amazon tributaries, in the waters of African lakes, in hundreds of villages untouched by modern civilization, the entire community gathers to fish. Nets are unfurled and set in a V, enclosing waters where fish abound. The drive aims at frightening the fish into compact groups. The technique has not changed for hundreds, perhaps even thousands of years. To record this custom, Stan Waterman, an experienced underwater photographer, prepares to capture the fish drive on film. Vibrations first disturb, then confuse the fish. As As the tempo quickens, they seem to panic, flocking toward the nets. Stan Waterman's film offers a vital lesson to modern man. For the custom it records is more than a curiosity. Though one of the most primitive of fishing methods, it might also be the wisest. Here there is no waste or needless slaughter. Free to pick and choose, they leave inedible fish or those not fully grown. The fishermen take from the water only what they need. As the last fish are collected from a small pocket where the two nets meet, each family will take what it needs. The rest will be sold, and the proceeds divided among the fishermen. As long as they are left alone to fish the native way, the catch will always be plentiful.
Fishing has been an exhilarating experience for Gar and Susie, but I was tempted to ask them how they would feel if they had to do it each day. In Princeton, an open-pit barbecue often becomes an exotic way to burn a steak. In the islands, the himaa is the traditional way to cook a feast of taro, breadfruit, and whole suckling pig. The rhythms of the tamure seem set to a beat ancient as their blood. Some observers look for ritual meaning in that beat. But like much of what thrives on the island, its purpose is probably pure fun.
For a few hours each day, the Waterman children rejoin the modern world as they catch up on their homework. Yet here, mathematics, literature, and history seem almost irrelevant. For instead of abstract principles, Gar, Gordy, and Susie are learning the survival skills of the islanders and, something no book can teach, to see, feel, and understand a new environment. Their mother knows that today, their most important lessons will not be found in books, but in the waters off Bora Bora. For several hours, Stan has readied diving and camera equipment in preparation for an expedition across the barrier reef.
How about your filter? Why was that you didn't use it yesterday? Well, you know, the water is itself a filter.
As a professional photographer and naturalist, exploration is his job. Today, he will guide his family through an undersea realm. He hopes someday Gordy, his son, will also be able to record this world on film.
Home in the case here.
To shield it from the crushing pressures at great depths, the motion picture camera is encased in a watertight capsule, capable of withstanding a stress of more than 1,000 pounds per square inch. Stan has led his children on dives before, but seldom to depths of over 100 feet, and never into a realm so rich in both beauty and danger as the waters off Bora Bora.
All right, let's get the regulators on these tanks as soon as you're done there.
Stan must complete one more vital task, instructing Gar, the youngest, in the exacting skill of underwater survival.
These are all up to pressure. 2,300 pounds per square inch is a full load. These are up to about 2,000, which is fine for the diving we'll be doing.
Stan's concern for his son's safety results from a personal brush with tragedy. Just 2 years ago, off this same reef at Bora Bora, insufficient air in his tanks forced Stan to surface too quickly. Flown to a hospital on a distant island, he narrowly escaped death from the dreaded bends. To prevent such a mishap, he checks all their equipment thoroughly.
Be very careful the way you seat that on the O-ring there. Your whole life can depend on this regulator and the way it's been put on carefully.
Do you get more air if you go down right after the tank's been filled?
No, you're drawing air, remember, through the regulator, which is the heart of the equipment, always at the same pressure as the water around you. That's the magic of this whole unit. Remember, men used to have to go down with hard hat helmets and hoses and were always tied by an umbilical cord to the surface. Now we're free, go like fish, and it's just in your lifetime that this has happened.
I led them into a world where they were strangers, where for the first time they saw a whole order independent of man, from the simplest life to the most complex, from the gentlest to the most aggressive.
The coral reefs that support man's island life sustain an immense variety of underwater creatures. Sea anemones carpet the reef like jungle plants, but they're actually predators that stun their victims with poison tentacles. Protected from its deadly sting, the damselfish lounges among the anemone's arms, luring creatures to their death in the tentacles. Even the most sedentary forms of life are sensitive to danger. The tridacna clam can detect the slightest change in light or hint of movement. Sea urchins, relatives of the starfish, rely on bristling armor. Even more impenetrable is the black-spined sea urchin, whose foot-long quills are tipped with venom. Yet these shielded creatures provide a slow and gentle service. As they move from place to place on tiny tubular feet, grazing on algae among the coral, their teeth wear down the reef bit by bit, grinding new sand for the floor of the lagoon.
I try to communicate my own sense of wonder, to seek out the world concealed from us and show my family that for the creatures of the reef, each bit of coral is a permanent refuge or a momentary hiding place.
Some creatures, like the bulldozer shrimp, are moved by instinct to scoop out homes, which they defend to the death with sharp pincers. The sea cucumber engulfs its enemies in a mass of sticky strands. But on the reef, no weapon is invincible. Nature's balance is maintained by hungry grazers like the surgeonfish. Many creatures patrol set territories, while others wander nomad-like over the ocean floor. The bold coloration of some reef dwellers serves to distract their enemies in the speckled undersea light. Perhaps the most elaborate disguise in nature protects the emperor angelfish. In its juvenile stage, the emperor angel's coloration resembles the eye of a giant fish. After several weeks, it begins to change into the adult pattern of jarring stripes. The coming of night brings added danger, for then the lionfish begins his hunt, cruising among the coral, protected by poisonous spines. Invisible until ready to strike, the coarse skin of the stonefish blends with its surroundings. Much feared in Polynesia, it is one of the most poisonous fish on Earth. Its sting may bring paralysis and delirium, and can kill a man in 2 hours.
I teach my children not to hate even the fiercest creatures on the reef, but to treat them with respect, because they don't kill out of hate or vengeance, but from the simple instinct to survive.
Creatures large and small take turns in a strange performance as they are picked clean of parasites by tiny fish called wrasse. At these cleaning stations, all natural hostility seems forgotten. As its teeth and gill sacks are groomed by the wrasse, a 5-foot moray eel looks as if he could purr with pleasure. Once provoked, its knife-sharp teeth can seize its victim in a death grip. In the world of the reef, apparent gentility is usually just a matter of a satisfied appetite.
The reward of exploration is a single moment of discovery, a glimpse few have ever seen before. It might come after years of searching, or only a few minutes into your first deep dive. At a depth of 130 feet, we come upon what appears to be a field of writhing stalks. Known as garden eels, These strange creatures are so elusive, they rarely appear at close range.
It is when you take the time to look that the commonplace becomes wondrous and wonders become commonplace. For 6 days, the Watermans worked side by side with the islanders. Now they join their friends in worship at a Himene house. In Polynesia, as in Princeton, New Jersey, the family goes to church on Sunday. The Bible is one of the few books printed in Tahitian. Perhaps this weakened its impact. Still a tribal culture, the islanders adopted its spirit, if not its letter.
This is a marae, a Tahitian marae, which is the word for temple, and they had sacrifices here up until, maybe 100 years ago.
Today, only a few maraes, last of the pagan temples, remain. Once, these ruins were a center of tribal power. To trespass where the Watermans now walk would have brought death. Only a small elite of island chiefs and priests could set foot here.
All the heads of the tribe stayed here, and this particular part of the marae was not available for anybody to either climb on or touch, and the whole thing was forbidden to women and children. They usually conducted their business here in the center of the marae.
And what happened up on the third shelf?
Well, nobody ever went up there, Gar. It was forbidden. It was the most sacred part of the temple.
But the natives discarded the cruelty of pagan ceremony for the gentle faith of Christianity. To the religious meaning of the hymns, they impart their own special sense of joy. Built upon countless billions of coral polyp skeletons, the living reef began its growth millions of years ago, when the island emerged from the ocean depths. Now it encloses its own world, a lagoon whose calm surface belies the activity that goes on below. It is here shells are found in rich abundance. Collectors prize many of the brilliantly colored specimens, and the islanders use them lavishly for decoration.
It is easy to overlook the fascinating spectrum of life in the shallow waters of the reef itself. The cowrie is one of the many species of gastropods that live on the reef, but it takes a sharp eye to penetrate its camouflage. The sea cucumber, bloated with seawater, from which it takes its nourishment, provides a ready squirt gun.
For about 5 minutes.
The shore holds its own history, open for those who can read it. Scars exposed along the beach leave records of the island's birth and growth. They teach more about the origin of the reefs than any book.
And I just happened to notice.
Here, a trained observer can trace the island's past and read its future.
These shells were alive and living millions of years ago. What you see here is the formation of an island, a study of it in cross-section. This coconut floated up on the island, germinated, sent down roots, and you had green, organic life growing. It decayed, more life formed, and now you have an island fully bloomed.
Millions of years ago, this placid world was rent by volcanic eruptions, spewing tons of lava up from the ocean floor. As the mound rose, tiny coral creatures anchored themselves to the hardened rock, then died, leaving calcium skeletons. Larger creatures became lodged on the reef, and floating vegetation took root.
Each one was a live animal, infinitesimally small.
I try to make my children aware of the balance and beauty of the life processes as they observe the equal vitality in the development of a coral polyp and a quarter-ton manta ray. They also begin to comprehend the forces we call nature. Inevitably, they must also come to value themselves.
It's the story of the volcanic Pacific world growing up from the sea and becoming the islands of the Pacific.
Polynesians consider a boy to be a man when he can do a man's work. Since the Watermans were living with fishermen, the sea was the proving ground. Gordy is an accomplished swimmer and at home in this world. Now, working with his father, he will enter the world of sharks to film their feeding at close range. The risk is calculated, and courage must be tempered with caution. Curious, but suspicious, the shark proves surprisingly difficult to attract. Gordy stalks his subject, mindful that at any moment the tables may turn. Tug of war ends with the sharks winning bait, spear, and gun.
Perhaps our traditional ideas of Polynesia are far removed from reality, but certainly no more so than the islanders' ideas of life in America.
Away from the carpool, the supermarket, and the PTA, Susanna Waterman discovers her own new worlds and rediscovers some of the simple pleasures of an unhurried life. Here, a trip to the grocery store is a long-awaited pleasure. An opportunity to sample tropical fruits, to smell exotic spices and fresh baked bread.
I feel like a little girl learning to do things over again, not in a hurry to cross them off a list, but to enjoy them one by one.
I had reserved one final underwater spectacle for Gordy. A ballet such as would not be found on any stage.
In a still lagoon lives a race of prehistoric giants, underwater creatures that have not changed for millions of years, kindred to the sharks and known to many by a different name, devilfish, the manta rays.
Because of their great size, the mantas have few natural enemies, but they seldom encounter man and viewed our approach warily. As we swam with them, they came to accept our presence.
Nature has not tampered with the manta ray's basic design for 350 million years. Some varieties of ray are armed with stinging tails. Others possess a powerful electric shock. The manta has little more than its fearsome appearance to frighten stronger creatures.
The mantas flourished before the human race existed. It is humbling to imagine they may still be cruising these waters long after we have vanished from the earth.
Often, remora accompany the manta to enjoy their host's protection. The Western world can offer Polynesia its culture and its carousels. But the Waterman children find the islands have their own unique forms of fun. And their playground is as wide as the horizon.
Come on, Woody!
Ajay's Island has been an education. But it is time to graduate, back to Tahiti, where the next classes await. For centuries, Tahitian transportation was bare feet on dusty paths. Buses are less quaint, but far more comfortable. Each is the private property of a different owner, who operates it on a loose and unpredictable schedule. He might sleep late or decide to go fishing, but if he is impatient to get to town, customers have to step lively. The price for the journey into Papeete not only covers the ride, but can include a music lesson as well.
I thought our return to Papeete would be like a decompression stop so I could adjust gradually to civilization again. But we arrived in the midst of French Polynesia's biggest holiday.
From scores of islands, some many days distant, thousands of people converge on Papeete for the same reason, to celebrate Bastille Day. A once solemn French observance, the Tahitians turn it into 2 weeks of revelry.
The island women rarely compete for money or social status, but they practice all year to vie for a more coveted prize, the title of Best Tamure Dancer. Peaceful Polynesia boasts one of the world's last garrisons of French foreign legionnaires, who turn out in full splendor for parade ground maneuvers. Once they were fierce warriors. Now, the greatest test most will ever face is a single coconut on a 30-foot pole. As part of the festivities, the islanders compete in performing music, too. From Tahaa, Raiatea, and Bora Bora, whole church choirs come to raise their voices in song. All year long, these men make their living husking coconuts for copra. From their livelihood, they have devised another sport, a demanding test of their professional skill. All coconuts that miss the barrel must be chopped open. The first team to strip them of their meat will win. To the traditional ceremonies, the natives have added the amusements of a modern carnival. Islanders accept these inventions gladly, for they enhance their enjoyment of life. Over the years, other innovations have fared less well. The sailing ship, steamer, propeller plane, and jet have left the Tahitians unimpressed, for few have any reason to leave. To many, the Ferris wheel seems the most sensible form of transportation. It only goes around in circles, but the voyage is a pleasure in itself. A return to Point Venus brings a symbolic end to the Watermans' adventure. Where Captain Cook discovered an untouched paradise, they found a unique education. His monument closes for them an experience few families are privileged to enjoy. What the Watermans learned in the islands goes far beyond an appreciation for the beauty and bounty of nature. They lived island style at a pace which affords satisfaction in even simple pleasure. Perhaps Polynesia will abandon its leisurely approach to life, but so far, the intrusions of civilization seem to adapt themselves to the rhythms of sea and trade wind. Stan guided his family, too, through another world, where the instinct for survival dictates all the rules. They watched the creatures of the reef work out their intricate relationships, far from the polluting influence of a nearby mainland. Often grim, they were as often humorous. An octopus, deprived of its prey, fights back, until it decides discretion might indeed be the better part of valor and disappears in a cloud of ink. The children missed a year of formal classroom education in Princeton, New Jersey. In its place, they received lessons that are not part of a classroom curriculum. But they took away much more than community fishing techniques and an ability in tamure dancing. They experienced a world where everything seemed to fit. And Stan Waterman hopes the experience will help his children put together their own worlds with similar harmony.